to another episode of the Chronicles podcast. My name is Becca and this is a podcast about mental health, disability and whatever I have the energy to sit down and record, to be honest. I also want to take a little bit of time before I get into this episode just to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back, because I got a notification when I opened YouTube Studio this morning that the channel is officially 2 years old, and I may only have 70 subscribers, but like I said at the end of the episode, I don't care if I have 70 or 7,000, because it would be terrifying for me to stand up in front of a group of 70 people at the moment and be like, hi, you all follow me. That would feel so intimidating. So if you are somebody who listens every week, even though I have taken breaks for mental and physical health over the past few years, I think this is episode number 7 or 8 of me posting consistently every week. So I am very proud of that, and I just had to take a little minute to celebrate for doing it, really. I guess every little milestone needs to be celebrated sometimes. I also feel like when I did my nursing video, my light was way too bright on my face for the fact that I had no makeup on when I was getting ready. When I put it on, I was like, oh, how did I not notice that when I was editing? I look like a ghost. However, these things just happen, I guess. I have spoken many times about how the podcast came about, that I shared things on my story on Snapchat about recovery to my close friends, where I felt like there was a bit less pressure, where people would be updated but they didn't really have to respond to it, as well as writing being a massive coping mechanism to get through bad periods of mental health, and definitely in the aftermath of me having my car accident. There are a lot of things that I took for granted living in an able body, just as simple as not actually having to think about when I walk and just doing it. And that is something for me that isn't now a reality. There are so many steps, pardon the pun, to get me walking. I need to put my socks on, not on my feet, on my stump, ease my way into my prosthetic, fasten belt, make sure there's no bunching of the socks because that causes pain. I then need to get up, have my crutches or my walking sticks, have to think about where I'm putting them in front of me, moving my leg that I still have, and then moving my prosthetic to make sure that it lands in the right place, which means not going too short a step, but also not overestimating how much I'm stepping. And that is something that is really hard. When you actually think about walking and where you're placing your feet, at times I do overstep when I wear my prosthetic and it gives me a wobble. I can kind of stumble, but that's why I have my mobility aids, because it's good to have that little bit of a safety net, that there is something to catch myself on before I end up on the deck. That is so terrifying to me. However, one of my goals is to be able to walk and move about without having to use mobility aids. However, it's just not something that I'm at yet. However, this is something that I am going to talk about more in this episode after waiting for months to get my prosthetic leg, which does not cause me pain. Pardon me. Wow, that was a big one. This is something that I am going to talk about more in this episode, as recently, after waiting 7 months without a prosthetic leg that I could wear that didn't cause me pain, this was due to short staffing of prosthetic technicians within limb services in Glasgow. And as far as I'm aware, from what my prosthetist told me, there have been new people who are hired to offset this staffing issue. However, when it comes to making prosthetics, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and this means that the new people that have been taken on require a lot of training to be able to get up to the point to make the prosthetics at the speed where it then slows down the waiting process. So what does that mean for me now? If you would like to hear more, then get comfy, grab a snack, a cup of tea, some water, and chill for a little bit before you need to carry on with whatever you're doing, or maybe my dulcet tones will send you into a nice, lovely sleep. Unless you're driving, fight that shit, because I ain't going to be the reason for another person becoming an amputee. Thank you very much. But before I get into this episode, please do the things that I always tend to ask at the end of the intro, because I forget before then. If you would like to show some support to the channel, if you like this video, leave a little like. If you would like to see some more content from me, you can hit the subscribe button. If you like it on audio platforms, I think it's like a like or give me a follow, and that will mean that you will be given notifications every time I upload a new episode. If there is anything that you would like to get in contact with me about, if there is anything from this episode that you resonate with, or a story that you have, you can drop it down in the comments, or if you would just like to contact me directly, you can send me an email to crippledchroniclespod@gmail.com. And I am going to get into the main section of this episode. I have already given you a little bit of background on what this episode is going to be about, as I have very recently got my new prosthetic that I have been eagerly waiting on for what felt like forever, to be honest. I think one of the last times I was actually able to wear my prosthetic was in June or July of last year, because I remember doing my second year amputation photo shoot and I really wanted to wear my leg and it was just too painful for me. So I had some photos that I took with my prosthetic, but I didn't have it on. I think I took one where I just held my prosthetic over my stump without actually putting on because it was too sore. However, I'm going to go back a little bit. So when I first got my leg chopped off at the end of 2022, I felt like I progressed so well in those first few months. And looking back, I do think that it went so well because I felt like I was going to have more difficulty or more hurdles to get over the initial stage of becoming an amputee. But I feel like once you've lived with your leg straight for 2.5 years, where any time you moved there was a risk of the pins pulling at my skin, I had used to be in so much pain that I thought I had it really well. But I realise now that I had my pain to a decent level because I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable around me if I was always in visible pain. However, I realised that that was me dampening down my traumatic experience of cleaning pin sites, being in agony anytime I moved, getting to a point where I literally had to choose between eating breakfast or being able to go to the toilet because I was in that much pain. During COVID, in a way, I felt like it was a bit of a blessing, and I don't know if anybody else will understand this, but it was nice to know that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only person that couldn't go out and do the things that I wanted to do, and basically everybody was in the same boat as me, except these restrictions were imposed by the government and not their own bodies. I don't know if there are any other people who are disabled or who became disabled around the same time and not related to the pandemic if they feel the same way. I do feel like there are a lot of immunocompromised people who have had a very difficult perspective as their health relied on people following restrictions to not put them at risk. They then also received a massive amount of criticism in recent times after the global panini had stopped being so prevalently spoken about, that those who would go out to protect themselves with masks due to disability have received criticism, harassment, judgment from others in terms of why are you still wearing a mask? It's not a pandemic anymore. All of these things, and it honestly just seems so thoughtless of people who do not realise that there are people who live every day like there are a global pandemic, because there are so many different risk factors that can make you more unwell and impact the quality of life from other people. People wearing masks are doing so to protect themselves, and if you have a problem about that, quite frankly, you should be minding your own fucking business, to be honest. But the point that I was actually wanting to make about the pandemic and not feeling alone being so restricted was that in August of 2022, when I got my leg amputated after 2.5 years of putting all of my energy into trying to do the things that would save my leg, it was scary to see it snap in front of me, and I know that all of that work and all of that energy that I had put into saving my leg was over. And that was the big reason initially why I freaked out when it happened. It wasn't because I was in pain, it was the shock of, I know something wrong has happened. I heard a crack and I'm pretty sure my leg is broken, and that means this is all for nothing. And yes, that was how I thought of it at the time, and I realised there are a lot of things that went into my recovery that now sitting here today, yeah, I wouldn't change it because I am who I am, and I had the experience that I did with my prosthetic initially because of the 2.5 years with the frame, and I have obviously put a lot of thought into it, that if I woke up after my car accident and I had a one leg, how would that feel? If I just woke up after a surgery and had one leg, how would that feel? And I feel like it would have probably been much more difficult to come to terms with being an amputee if I didn't have any say in it. I didn't get to do my research beforehand, whereas this kind of really came down to being my choice. It was either chop off your leg or put a metal rod that runs right from your hip to your ankle with zero movement in your leg, and also accept the fact that this might not work and you might need to get your leg amputated anyway. I had already done that for nearly 3 years and I just couldn't do that for any more of my life, to be honest. It was scary to be told that I might not walk again. I might have to use a wheelchair for the rest of my life. The only experience that I had been of being in a wheelchair was with a fuck off massive frame on my leg, where it drew so much attention. My chair was bigger because of the size of the frame. I needed an extended leg rest for both of my legs, which I started to realise the leg rest that I had my framed leg on, actually the vibrations of it were making it worse. However, I still needed my extended leg rest for my left leg, because up until getting my leg amputated, I only had about 15 to 20 degrees of a knee bend in that leg, and I mean now it's at 75, 80. I have really improved since getting my leg amputated. However, at that time when I was going to physio, we were trying to work on bending my knee, and I have 2 plates in my left knee that go into my kneecap basically, because my surgeon had said when I had my accident, my left knee was basically just floating in my leg, not attached to anything. So when I bend it now, it cracks and pops and makes some sounds, and sometimes it is really fucking sore. But back at that time working with physios, they had said we don't want to push it too much because my left leg could have re-broken, and to be honest, it was already hard enough work dealing with one shattered leg, to be honest. So when I got my leg amputated and I woke up after surgery, it was a relief. It was a relief to not feel all of that pain and weight weighing on my leg anymore. I didn't have the pins to clean or to try and dress without ripping clothing. I initially had a catheter after I had my leg chopped off, but that was removed pretty quickly, and I was then able to go to the toilet independently. And I mean, actually sitting on a toilet, that was something that I hadn't been able to do for 3 years, and I can't believe how much of a massive thing that felt like doing the toilet, having a shower without worrying about getting the frame wet and having to clean my pins. And are they going to get infected? Am I going to need antibiotics? Like, all of these worries that I had in my head when I had the frame on after getting my leg amputated, those kind of died down and went away, which was what I needed. And for 2 years before that, I did the toilet in a commode, which required carers to come in and empty it for me so I could still live on my own. I had carers coming in to make dinners for me, mostly microwave meals, but the longer time had got on, I was able to kind of get up and put something in the oven and then go back to bed, and it would mean that when the carers came in, the food was ready to come out the oven and I was able to eat something that wasn't just like the same 5 microwave meals on rotation, because I'm very autistic when it comes to food. I might as well just say it like that. Like, sensory sensitivity is off the charts, so if something doesn't feel right in my mouth, I can't eat it. And see, when it comes to like microwave meals especially, like I would get, say, like a chicken tikka microwave meal, and yeah, I'd tend to like get naans with it so that I would just have the naan in the sauce, because the chicken, after being cooked in the microwave, had this like fucking weird, disgusting texture to it, to be honest, that I just couldn't stand anymore. And it was hard. Like, it was hard to live life like that and thinking, okay, what can I eat that's actually easy, or it doesn't take a lot of time for carers to do it for me. But not long after I got my leg amputated, I was actually able to stop receiving home care. I have my cleaner, Donna, who still comes in and helps me about. Like, I will potter about and do things like the dishes or trying to get the washing and get on top of it, tidying around so things aren't as cluttered. I'm not going to lie and say that I do not live a cluttered life, because the wall in my bedroom right now would say different. However, I'm getting shelves. It's gonna get better. Just, it's not good at the moment, and we're getting there, and that's okay. It took me a really fucking long time to be okay with asking people for help, and even then, some days it is still so fucking hard, because there are things on one day that I can do on my own and the next day I can't. So sometimes there is those down times where I need more help, and I do think over time that I have got better at asking for help, even if in some areas it is still pretty difficult. Me talking about clutter, fucking, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my bedsheet hanging up in the door, a fucking shopping bag that's got toilet rolls in it, and then my random bag that I take to Eleanor's that has like my blanket and stuff in it. So I'm like, I'm trying to live a bit of a less cluttered life. However, my brain is pretty cluttered, so I guess my surroundings are too. With that backstory and the little bit of tangent I just went off on that, the reasoning for that is because having my leg amputated was a lot easier for me than I expected it to be. I had done my research, I had spoken to the limb services team, I had the stats that 1 in 4 people with above amputee, 1 in 4 people with above knee amputations walk again, and even that can be very small distances. I had healthcare workers like physios and OTs who didn't sugarcoat the information that I needed to know. They let me ask all of the questions that I had, so that when the idea of amputation came up, I went for that. I had done my research, I had made an informed decision, and me saying that it was easier than I expected, I feel like it is so important to reiterate that is not me saying that being an above knee amputee is easy. I think my expectations that I would have a lot more hurdles in the first few months, but instead I had a few months where it actually went pretty well, and then the problem started with me being in pain and fitting issues, and I have a locked knee prosthetic, which means when I stand up, the knee is locked in place. I feel like I have probably explained this before, however, I'll just explain it a little bit again. So I have my prosthetic, it is locked straight, which means it does not bend when I move. And ideally, I want to get to a free moving knee prosthetic, which I mentioned in the last episode. However, having a straight prosthetic when I had a frame on my leg and my knee locked in place, that was the safest option for me. Other amputees have other reasons on why they become amputees. Some people have car accidents that are worse or less severe. It may have been from diabetes, cancer. Any of these things can mean that somebody has a amputee of below the knee or above the knee, and everybody is going to be different on what prosthetic they are started on, because it depends on what level of activity you do, what kind of things you want to do, what you do for work, what your goals are. And like, sometimes if it was just a case of wanting to waddle about a wee bit, then yeah, a straight leg probably would fit me, like suit me. However, I want to get up the top of Monroe, and I feel like for that I probably need a free moving knee. However, if I don't get a free moving knee, I'll fucking do it anyway, just watch me. But I feel like it would be easier if I had a knee that I could move if I'm fucking scaling a mountain, you get what I mean? Jeez, I'm getting so distracted here, and I totally can't even find where I am in my notes because I've just mashed everything together like I usually do. So let me just recenter myself. Oh, that is it. So in 2023, I had a appointment where we went through different activities, and I ticked all of the boxes to move to a free moving knee, which I was so excited about, like I couldn't believe it. But that is when I started to get the pains in my leg, and now in 2025, it's still something that I'm working towards to get a free moving knee. It kind of sucks being in that position, but it is what it is, I suppose. I am still working towards my goal of having a free moving knee. Going to my appointment last week and getting my new leg, there was a shit ton of anxiety. I had to worry that the socket might not fit, that it would be too large or too small or just not right where it causes pain. It was giving me a pain in the exact same place where I had the issue before, and this actually just made my heart sink, and I was so in my own head with worrying that I would need to wait more months before I could work on my mobility. However, thankfully, after a few adjustments, which were kind of the edges of the prosthetic sometimes can be pretty jaggy when you get them, like not sharp, but if you think about putting soft tissue onto something hard, then it can hurt. Oh, what a way to describe that, Becca. And again, me explaining that, I'm like, stick to what you're actually saying, because I just keep getting lost. However, podcasts are for yapping, and that is what I'll do. They made a few adjustments, which was melting the plastic, and then I also needed some of like the inside kind of shaved down a bit, because they think it is one of my main kind of like nerves or blood vessels that will sometimes be more prominent in people, and they've said at times that they can actually make a channel in the prosthetic so that it doesn't have pressure on that. However, mine wasn't there when I got the cast done, so they obviously couldn't do anything to help it at the moment. However, the other thing that was a problem is I've had to go back to a different method of wearing a leg. So I spoke about when getting up, like putting on my socks, wiggling myself in, adjusting my belt. That was what I had to do initially, and it's back what I'm doing now. However, before getting this leg, I had moved to having a leg that is air suctioned on, and I would wear a silicone liner. However, these prosthetics make it a lot harder when like stump volume is changing, because it means that if I was to lose weight for not having a prosthetic for 7 months, I would very quickly need a new socket, because there wouldn't be enough mass in the socket for it to suction on. It would probably just fall off because it would be too loose. Issue with wearing the belt and having an air suctioned on leg is when you wear the belt, you, like, so obviously if you're standing, your feet are out straight. However, like, my prosthetic has to start like this so that when I wiggle in, it comes straight. Whereas when you put on a prosthetic that is air suctioned on, you just have both straight, put your leg in, sorted. However, I had put this belted one on straight initially because I just wasn't thinking. It had been ages since I had worn a prosthetic with a belt, and this meant that when I was walking initially, instead of my feet being forward, my prosthetic was tilted in, and that meant that where there's a bit of a dip for inside my leg, that was turned in more, which meant there was then pressure on the part that was hurting me before. So after kind of turning it out and going normal as if having a fucking cyborg leg is normal. I mean, anything is normal to anybody because normality is just a social construct. Anyway, what was I actually saying? Oh yeah, that is it. So after we kind of sorted that problem with it being sliding in and like cutting up into me, I was uncomfortable, but it wasn't painful. And the reason why I say it's uncomfortable is, like, at the back of your leg when you've got a prosthetic, like, it's almost like a little shelf that your arse sits on. Like, if anybody ever gets their leg amputated above the knee, you'll know all about it from this. But, like, my prosthetist will literally just stick her hands in my socket and be feeling all around to make sure that all of the muscles, all of the tissues are in the right place. And also, fun fact, when you're walking with a prosthetic, you need to fucking tense your muscles quite a bit. So when I'd walked first, I totally forgot about that. Like, it has been 7 to 8 months without me having a prosthetic. Of course I forgot that. However, it wasn't until the next day when I put my leg on at home and I started to do some walking, I really realised how much of an impact not having my prosthetic for so long had on me. It was one of those days where I just wanted to collapse in the kitchen floor in tears, to be honest. It took me 5 to 10 minutes to put my leg on, and then I managed maybe around 5 minutes of walking. My back was aching, I was sweating profusely, and when I was lying in bed after these 5 minutes, the phantom pains and sensations were really starting. So I had to put my electric blanket on, have my painkillers, and focus on some colouring to try and decompress and not focus too much on what I was feeling, because I didn't want to spiral into this being my fault and directing kind of self-hate, because it wasn't my choice. I didn't choose for this to happen. It was out with my control, and ideally, if I could have had a prosthetic for the last 7 months, I would have. So it was really difficult to acknowledge that yeah, it feels shit, but I don't want to tear myself down because of that, because there is nothing within that can actually be helpful for me. And that is something that I learned last year in doing compassion focused therapy, that I was somebody that was very good at giving compassion out to other people. However, I really struggled to give it back to myself and to accept it from other people, to be honest. Like, there was such a time in my life where I thought I deserved pain, I thought I deserved hurt, I thought that everything has happened to me is because I'm a shit person and I deserve that, and that comes with a lot of internalised guilt and shame and things that weighed extremely heavy on me. And in doing this therapy, I realised it's actually okay to set those things down. Like, it doesn't need to be like that. It's hard to know that I am basically in the same place that I was in 2022 with my mobility, and how hard that setback has been, and being able to sit with the fact that those feelings are there, but not blame myself, but also not get overrun with anger that I had to wait so long because there was nothing that could really be done about that, and I'm just hoping in the future that when a leg doesn't fit me or I'm needing a new socket that I don't have to wait as long. However, I don't know that for certain, and that means the anxiety from worrying about putting all of this work in to build up my strength, my stamina, my balance, working towards unaided walking with a free moving knee. I still don't know if walking unaided is possible, and if it's something that is not possible, I'll accept that, but I want to give it my best shot. I have to try and put my leg on for some time, even if it's 10 minutes and then I have a break day the next day and then 10 minutes, because I tend to wear my prosthetic and then take a rest because it can end up being in pain. And before the pain got worse with where my prosthetic was it almost felt like it was biting me. Like any time I took a walk, it was like there was a little shark inside my leg that was just nipping me every time I walked. And that was like, before that happened, well, it was kind of already happening at the time. I thought it had maybe been sorted, but it hadn't. I actually made a little like challenge for myself. So when I'm editing, I will put it up here, of the little colouring sheet that I made that was, pardon me, in the shape of a prosthetic, and I had like 30 sections, which meant I could colour it in each day and it would show how much that I had worn my prosthetic. And this was really helpful because when I used to go to physio, it would only really be, oh yeah, I put it on 2 days ago and I wore it for this amount of time, or I went to my brother's and I had it on all day, so I was walking about and I was doing this, but it was only kind of like the most recent things or the biggest achievements that would stick in my head. And that wasn't, like, it was helpful, but it wasn't the most helpful because ideally they want you to be wearing your prosthetic every day. So that's why I kind of set up my challenge for that. And I think I did kind of well up until maybe day 20 or so. I'll need to like fact check myself when I'm editing this. And like I said, I'll put it in here somewhere so you can have a look of like the little key that I made, because it was like 1 hour plus however many hours, like different colours, whatever. And hopefully once I have built myself back up and got my stamina and my strength, I am actually going to a physio appointment this week so we can see that my walking is still good, that I'm not going to do anything that is going to like throw me off or impact my recovery, because I've not had a leg for so long. So I'm hoping that after this, when I'm getting a bit more used to wearing my leg and I can actually wear it every day without the pain kind of totally dragging me down, I hope that there is a time where I can kind of redo this little challenge and show to myself that it does get a bit better. And I suppose it's like making a little bit of a training diary, so that if it does come to a point where I am back at having months without a prosthetic, I know the kind of things that I can do to build back up. And I know that is me trying to offset the amount of anxiety I have that this pain is going to start again and I might have to wait more months for my prosthetic, if that makes sense. And with all of this, it can actually be really fucking demotivating and deflating. Like, if I go out of the house right now, I still need to take my chair everywhere with me because I will likely need a rest. Ideally, I would love to have a rollator. However, with my finances, I can't afford it at the moment. Like, when I had my leg before, I was starting to work up. Like, I managed to go to my grand's without taking my wheelchair, and I went into the shop and bought an energy drink. And I also took a little walk I didn't take a walk to Strathclyde Park because that would be fucking miles. But I drove myself to Strathclyde Park, and then I took a little walk where I was like, oh, that bench doesn't look too far away, but fuck me, see, when I was walking, it felt like it was about 20 miles away, to be honest, and that is really dramatic because it wasn't 20 miles. It was probably 0.2 of a mile. But I don't know, maybe I'll fact check myself in that one, because I think I probably turned Strava on when I was doing it, so we can see how dramatic I'm actually being when I come to edit. And I'm going to need to pause for a second because I brought my charger and I didn't plug it in, and my camera's going to die if I don't do it. The more I live with disability that is dynamic, learning to use my wheelchair and my leg, but accepting right now that if I go out anywhere, I need both. One of the problems I have at the moment is when I had my prosthetic before, I had a different wheelchair, and I'm just going to reverse back. So if there's a bit of silence in the audio one, that is why I'm showing off the fact that the chair that I have now is different from the one... Oh, let's start that again, because I just fucking put the brakes on and clicked myself. The reason why I did that is because the chair that I have now is different to my previous one, because this chair does not have armrests, and when I'm using my prosthetic or anytime getting up, I usually need to push up off of something, which is okay when I don't have my leg on. I can use the front of the wheelchair and I can stand up pretty easily. However, when you have a prosthetic that doesn't bend, and well, it does bend when I'm sitting down, let me just clarify that, because I really meant to say it earlier on and I get distracted. When I sit down, there's a lever on the side of it, which means my leg bends, because if I was to wear a prosthetic that just sat out straight, that would cause a lot of problems, probably pressure sores, ulcers, because anybody that has a prosthetic or knows somebody with a prosthetic will know that these legs aren't something that are just lightweight. They are pretty heavy, which in comparison, they're probably lighter than... That is a fucking insane sentence I was about to say, and I was going to say they're probably lighter. If you chopped off your leg and weighed it and then weighed the prosthetic, it's probably lighter than what your leg is. But after not having a leg, it's kind of hard to tell that weight. So with having a fixed prosthetic, like I said before I went on to explaining all of that, when I'm standing up, I can't have the prosthetic bent, means that it is then a lot harder to get up. So I, right now, can't go out in my wheelchair with my prosthetic because I've not figured out a way to safely stand up. And that is something that is so fucking frustrating. Are you kidding me on? I need to learn how to re-stand up from my wheelchair. What the fuck? Being disabled is... wild. There are so many things that I would never have considered before my accident that disabled people have to deal with, and something as simple as taking armrests off a wheelchair, you would think that probably doesn't have a lot of impact, but then when I look at actually trying to stand and get up, yeah, it does have an impact. And another thing is, when I got this active wheelchair, they had obviously measured me to make sure that it was a good fit. However, I'd said to them oh, I don't have a prosthetic at the moment, can we add a little bit on so that when I'm wearing my prosthetic? And she'd said, well, usually it's one or the other. And it's well, yeah, okay, that's maybe good, but if it's one or the other, how do I get better at walking and accept I need a break? That is why I'd said earlier, I would love to have a rollator where I could hold it and have the stability and push myself, but then also have the option of a seat if I needed it. However, a lot of a lot of disability aids and things that help people are not accessible price-wise, so that's the boat that I'm in at the moment. Maybe by the end of 2025 I will be able to afford to get myself a nice pretty rollator, but we'll see. And I mean, by then maybe I've got a bit better at walking, and I will most certainly have figured out how to get up off of my wheelchair, because that is going to be something that will be getting done ASAP, to be honest. But there is part of this where, when I was talking about asking for help and things like that before, and saying like, I've got better at it, but some things are still difficult. The place where I realise these difficulties is in areas where I don't know how to help myself. And if I don't know how to help myself, I don't know how to tell somebody else what they can do to help me, if that makes sense. Because I feel like there's a lot of things to figure out about the body that I'm in now, and I have said before that I'm thinking about doing like a disability 101, where I look at kind of things that people should know about becoming disabled, because it's going to happen to everybody at one point. And like, you might laugh that off and think that I'm joking, but I qualified as a nurse, went to go to my, like, I thought I was going to come home and go to my work, and I have ended up without one leg. Like, I would love for it not to be that easy, but everybody is one bad day away from becoming disabled, and it's better to know the information than to feel like fear, anxiety, lost, like, because it's you only really know things if you know somebody that's disabled, or I guess if you listen to podcasts like this one as an able-bodied person, because if you do, thanks for being a fucking ally. And if you still think poorly about disabled people, then fuck you, that's your problem, and you should probably get that sorted out, because maybe it'll come to you quicker than everybody else, because better to live and learn than to be a judgmental cunt. Wow, I have been recording for 44 minutes, and I can tell that it is clearly getting into my brain, because what the fuck was that about, Becca? That was just yap. All I can do right now is to keep going, keep plodding on, and try to do my best each day as somebody where my best looks different for different days. I was also gifted some new prosthetic shoes from someone in my life, because the shoe on my prosthetic is like new, and the one that I've been wearing when I've not had my prosthetic is like grey on the inside instead of white. Again, I might put a photo in of them so you can see what I mean. But I did find that when I put these new shoes on my prosthetic, it almost seemed like walking was a little bit easier, and I don't know if it's something to do with the fact that the shoe I've been wearing whilst not having my prosthetic is probably worn down quite a bit compared to my prosthetic shoe, and that meant that there was a bit of offsetness. I don't even think that is a word, but I'm going to go with it. And when I put these different shoes on, like, almost felt like it kind of balanced back up. I don't know how to explain it. Like, when I had the old shoes on, it almost just felt like the prosthetic was maybe a bit longer, but not longer in a way that it actually made it like really noticeable. However, I really hope that like my prosthetic lasts me a while, where I get to get good use out of these shoes. I get to work on my mobility and my walking and my strength and my stamina and all of the things that I have mentioned throughout this episode, because it mean like when I don't have a prosthetic, it's paused. Like, that recovery is on pause, and there is nothing that I can do about it. And fair enough, in the last episode I spoke about the fact that over the winter it has been harder because it has been colder, and that has meant that there has been an increase in the amount of pain that I have been feeling. And I do actually have an episode coming on that where I look at the common misconceptions around chronic pain, and then in my experience what it is actually like to live with chronic pain. And then I also added in some like suggestions of things that can be done to help. However, a lot of people that live with chronic pain have heard these suggestions until they're blue in the face. So I have kind of actually looked at what the suggestions are and then what the reality of those suggestions are. So that will be out in a few weeks. I was going to plan on recording it for next week, but I actually have a more important video that I am actually just going to sit and record after this one and get it edited and get it out after this one posts. I mean, like next week, not right now. Because if you are disabled, you will have heard about the proposed cuts to benefits such as PIP, and I am pretty sure they are putting a freeze on universal credit. So I just wanted to take a bit of time to talk about that, talk about what changes might be coming, what it might impact, and what it is actually like just now living as a disabled person on benefits, because I realised today that I am actually below the poverty line before I even pay any bills. Like, after my rent is paid, I'm below the poverty line, which is fucking shocking, to be honest, but it is what it is. Like, there is nothing that I can do about it other than argue a decision on my PIP, because I'm 1 point off of being given the enhanced rate of daily living, as if being an amputee doesn't impact every single fucking area of daily living. However, that is enough for this episode. I really didn't think that this was going to be that long, to be honest. I've rambled and went on quite a few different tangents and hardly really looked at my notes except to reorient myself to where I am. However, I hope you have enjoyed this episode, even if it has been a little bit chaotic, to be honest. If you can spot the difference in the next episode, you can leave it in the comments of what I do to make it look as if I've recorded this on a different day. But if you're a weekly listener, you can probably know that I record like 2 episodes at a time, edit them, schedule them, and then like this is me trying to be consistent, trying to get on with it. If you have enjoyed this chaos, this yapping, please leave a like on the video, subscribe on YouTube, follow on audio platforms, turn the notifications on so you don't miss an upload from me. You can follow me on other socials like TikTok and Instagram at Chronicles Pod, and if there is anything you would like to get in contact with me about, you can send me an email to cripplecroniclespod@gmail.com. Please look after yourselves, look after your loved ones, have a lovely week, and I will catch you next week. Bye!